bittersweet honor to have been asked to say a little bit about my old friend and mentor, Jerry Steckler, a maven, a mensch, and a polymath, if there ever was one. Jerry was the inspirational teacher for many in this community for decades. For the last 2 decades or so of his life, I had the good fortune to be part of two organizations in which we were both very active. We spent a lot of time together. He possessed so much of so many wonderful attributes that it made me wonder at times if God, if there is one, had lost track of the rest of us. Jerry always seemed to me to possess the wisdom of the ages. Sure, he had plenty of knowledge and a huge amount of both clinical and lived experience, but it was wisdom, whatever that means exactly, that he exuded. In discussion after discussion, either in groups or in one-on-one moments, Jerry would offer a perspective that seemed to come from very far away, someplace where he could see things that the rest of us didn't see, where he could consider everything in a larger, more complex universe, where he could see the whole world, and not just the whole world, and not just even the people in the whole world, but the humanity, the aspirations, the tragic histories that these people carried within them. He could see the big picture, but he never lost sight of the fact that every one of us embodies and struggles with the same contradictory impulses, the same human dilemmas, the same devastating losses and disillusionment, and can only hope to arrive at outcomes which were always least worst solutions to problems that could never be solved, but could only be borne. But this awareness did not produce a man who was pessimistic or resigned in any way. In fact, I would say that Jerry was the most optimistic man I've ever known. He always saw the upside. He relished the challenge, whatever it might be, and he loved to tackle it, knowing, I think, that there was where the real excitement lay. Not in solutions, but in the attempt to find solutions, and failing that, in the creative adaptations that our fumbling around produced. I recall a recurring experience with Jerry, where a few of us would be talking about some clinical situation, and would ask Jerry what he'd have said at some moment in time. Without exception, Jerry would refuse to answer that question. He drove us all crazy. We cajoled, we pleaded, we reasoned to no avail. I probably called him some names. I don't really remember. I know I felt like calling him a few names. The thing is, we all knew that he had the answers to all of life's questions. But he wouldn't tell us what they were. What chutzpah. Here's the other thing. Jerry had an unshakable belief that everyone had to find his or her own answers and his or her own voice in the fullest sense of that word. And he refused to do anything that might get in the way of that journey. Jerry was childlike in the best sense of the word. He could simultaneously be the oldest and the youngest person in the room. He could get as much pleasure out of dirty jokes as he could from reading Spinoza. And he really liked Spinoza. Actually, I think that dirty jokes were a little higher on his list. As Jerry's illness began to get the best of him, and as that great, nimble, and imaginative mind of his began to periodically falter, we'd get that great impish grin that all of us in this room can remember. When I'd even begin, usually at Tony's insistence, to tell him a joke. I didn't even have to get to the punchline, which he might or might not have understood by that point. He knew a joke was being told, and that was good enough for him. To the very end, seemingly out of nowhere, Jerry could make a comment or an observation, again with that little smile of his, with that twinkle in his eye that we all can remember, that made it clear that he was enjoying himself. He always enjoyed himself. I recall one get-together up in Maine, where Tony and I were trying to move Jerry from one chair to another so that we could all sit down for a meal. We each had Jerry under one arm, but he felt very, very unsteady and hesitant to move. He had not said anything for a good long time at that point, but when I asked him if he was afraid he might fall, he looked up with a smile and said, "No, I'm not afraid. I assume I'm gonna fall. Jerry was never satisfied with formulaic thinking or living and hated self-righteousness, contentment. He enjoyed turning accepted norms and ideas upside down and inside out. This was one of his ways he liked to play. One terrific story that captures this came not from Jerry, but from a past president of Division 39 of the American Psychological Association, who recounted a board meeting where a discussion was taking place about which, among a variety of harsh penalties, should be imposed on members who had violated some ethical guidelines with a patient. Jerry apparently objected to the casual vilification of these people and raised the disquieting idea that every person in the room was capable, under the right conditions, of transgressing in exactly the same way that the offending member had. According to the person in the room who recounted this story, Jerry's insistence on this idea, in the face of widespread denial, caused lots of aggravation. I imagine Jerry as Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men. I wish I'd have been there, because I know he would have gotten a real kick out of the proceedings, but it wouldn't have been just a game for him. Jerry would never abide by any attempt, as he saw it, to rob anyone of his or her humanity, no matter what they had done. It just wouldn't have mattered. Nor would he be able to ignore the efforts by those who were in that room to deny the dark underbelly of their own humanity. He was certain in the truth that, as Harry Stack Sullivan said to us once, we are all more human than otherwise. Jerry didn't just believe this, he lived it. He could be very revealing about his own vulnerabilities and failings and about his own traumatic experiences. He could talk so openly about his own countertransference reactions in his clinical work that the thought might occur to you that he had stopped his analysis a few years too early. But that, of course, was not the case. Jerry was always reminding us not only that we never rid ourselves of those parts that connect us most with the animal kingdom and with each other, but he also wanted us to value those parts, live with them, learn from them, and recognize that they are the part of the package. He knew that the more we accepted those things in ourselves, the more we would be able to understand and accept them in others. He urged us to take the blinders off, and he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Freud called psychoanalysis, quote, the study of self-deception. In Jerry, he had a committed acolyte. As Jerry's health declined, I was acutely aware of losing more than a cherished friend, someone who I, like all of you here today, really loved. It was hard not to love Jerry. I was aware that all of us in our field, professional field, and all of those to come would be poorer for not having access to everything he carried around inside of him. Those of us close to Jerry loved to tell stories about him or repeat pearls of wisdom that he casually dropped here and there. I personally love to hear them and tell them. For me, it's a way of honoring him, but also a way to keep his unique contributions, and especially his person, alive and available. Jerry never wrote a single comprehensive statement about his thinking or his work, and that is really too bad. I attribute this more to his humility than to anything else. Had he had a little more narcissism, we might have gotten such a piece out of him. But then it wouldn't have been the Jerry that we all knew and loved. I'm not sure he thought of himself as a big thinker, even though everyone around him knew that he was full of big ideas, really big ideas, wonderful ideas. So it's left to those of us who carry him around inside to keep his ideas alive and to celebrate him in the way that he would never have celebrated himself. And that is what I'm hoping that we can do. I, for one, will do everything I can to credit him by sharing his insights, his wisdom, and his perspective on life with everyone I know, by honoring his integrity, his decency, and his insatiable curiosity. And if I remember some great idea but not where it came from, I'm going to credit Jerry anyway. What the hell? Even if it wasn't his idea, it would have been eventually. One of the aphorisms that Jerry liked, really liked, quintessentially simple and profound at the same time was, quote, "You can have anything, you just can't have everything." He might have added, "But never forget the fact that although you may be able to have anything, you may well not have it forever." Jerry Steckler was someone we had for a good long time. But in the end, we could not have him forever, at least not in the same way. But as far as I'm concerned, he's alive and well in this room today. We still do have him.